Welcome to War with me, Andy.
And me, James.
There we go.
We did good this time.
Yeah.
We had to clear out that last take.
Yep, this is take 2 on an intro. And we're introing something a bit different this week for our podcast.
We are. We're going to take you on a trip back in time. And no, we don't mean to the campaign for North Africa. But it is still related to that. We haven't changed the theme of the podcast, by the way. It is still related to the game. We've had some luck in that we had a visit from 2 guests.
Yeah, extremely lucky. We'll see who they are.
Yeah, we were graced with the presence of the hosts of what was the Pacific War Channel podcast and is still the YouTube channel and is now the Echoes of War podcast. Craig and Gaurav, 2 guys who actually know what they're talking about.
Yeah, incredibly knowledgeable and also very generous with their time to talk to 2 people who they have no idea who they are, who just sent them an email.
Yeah, we came across them. I decided to do a bit of well-needed research about the campaign in North Africa when we started doing this. When we decided, it was after we'd purchased the game, we were waiting for it to show up, and I thought we should probably find out a little bit about it. And by chance, these guys were doing a podcast series about the campaign in North Africa. So I binged that. They've just released the 10th episode of it a little while ago. We're recording this now in 2025. It's the new year. Happy New Year.
Yes, this is post.
This is after that. And we recorded this back in early December.
Yeah,
with these guys.
Because it's taken us a tremendous amount of time to get our shit together and get a podcast out.
Turns out when you don't know what you're doing, it makes it really difficult to release stuff.
Yeah.
But we got there. We're here. It's out. We've released the first 2 episodes now, so we're recording this. We're going to start pumping them out. And we thought we'd give a little bit of context to it, because when you listen to the interview, these guys, they regularly speak over Zoom calls. They've got a channel that's well established. They know what they're doing. We don't. We hadn't even released a podcast when we recorded this with them. But they were great. It was a fun time. Fired off some questions. It did get cut short because I didn't realize if you don't pay for Zoom, there's a time limit on the meeting. So towards the end, we just kind of get cut off. And I panic a little bit. But it's good if you want to know about the history behind it, which we did. That's what this one's for.
If you really want to know history behind it, I can't recommend that 10-part series enough to get actual historical detail and insight. But they provided a lot to us in that conversation, and also really good at tying it into the game. They took that and just ran with it, provided insight in both the sense of the war overall, some of the more interesting rules we ran by them.
Oh, yeah.
And then also got some good general World War II war game advice that we'll hopefully be able to apply.
And yeah, we'll be taking that with us. So we're gonna play you the call that we had. It's audio only, I'm afraid, because when it comes to video, they had some lovely backdrops that would have been great to share, but ours was so embarrassingly poor quality. We can't put that out there. Sorry, we're gonna have to just go with audio only. So here it is. Here's the interview with those guys, and enjoy. Record on my end. There we go. That should be it working, I believe. Yeah, seems to be on. So, Andy, we aren't experts at all in the field of history or war games, but thankfully, we do have the pleasure of 2 individuals who are well versed in history, which is required, I think, to give us a bit of background on what we're trying to do here. So yeah, we have Craig and Gaurav, who are the hosts of is it Echoes of War now, the channel? It's going through a bit of a rebrand.
A little bit confusing. So I'm Craig from the Pacific War channel, but for the podcast, we wanted to stop limiting ourselves to the Pacific War. So now we're Echoes of War.
Yeah. So some individuals with a lot more experience when it comes to history than ourselves. I actually stumbled across your podcast because you did a series recently about the campaign for North Africa, which is
the basis of the game. So I thought I'd try and brush up on my history, and reached out to you guys, and you were generous enough to share some time with us to give us some context about the game itself in its historical significance. And yeah, we wanted to try and brush up on our history a little, and run some questions by you, if that's quite all right, to see
Absolutely.
if we've got a general understanding of the actual campaign. So the campaign itself took place. It was night. This is going to be a really basic question, and if I get this wrong, this is really bad. 1940 to 1943. Is
Yep.
that right? Yep. Nailed it. Nailed it. Got that. Um, so the game itself, do you know much about the game? Have you encountered the game in passing?
So until your email, I had no idea that this fascinating game existed. This is really one for your audience to know. This is like Guinness Book of Records type of game. I don't think I've ever come across a more complex and long played game in my life. And I've been playing Axis and Allies, which is a
Hmm.
comparable in a smaller scale board game for like 20 years. But even the largest Axis and Allies map doesn't even touch 1/100th of this thing. This is an incredible board game made a long time ago. And just looking at the rule set, and apparently it's supposed to be 100 turns to play this. Um,
Yeah, 111,
yeah.
to be precise. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Has anyone ever
I would
completed this
just
game?
No, that
I
that is the
I would
appeal.
just say one thing. The only time I heard about this game was when I just briefly saw it in the Big Bang Theory episode.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Every time I've mentioned this to friends, co-workers, anyone, they all say, "Oh, you mean the game from The Big Bang Theory?" And I've never seen The
Mm.
Big Bang Theory, but I have watched that episode now. And yeah, Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory tries to play it with his friends, and they're not interested, and rightly so, because, like you say, it's 111 turns. Each turn is meant to take 10 hours, so it's going to be a Herculean task. But no, no one's finished it.
There's
Supposedly.
always the first for everything.
Exactly, and we're going to be the
Yeah.
first. We're going to document it. We're going to play it. We're probably not going to enjoy all of it, but we're going
It's
with it
gonna
anyway.
it's
Yeah.
gonna take longer than the North African campaign for sure.
Exactly, yeah. We
Yeah.
may as well have went out into the desert and spent some time there
Well,
instead.
as long as your relationship remains like how we would see the Western Allies relationship remain throughout the war,
True.
and now not the Axis forces, I think then at least it's more enjoyable.
Well, that's it, because
Yeah.
it is a competitive game, and I'm going to be playing the Axis forces, which means
Nice.
I've got a real uphill
Just
battle.
just remember this: you have amazing cappuccino machines in a lot of numbers.
Yeah, yeah, I suppose that is a benefit. Um, so on that point, since I'm going to be the Axis forces, I've got a real uphill battle, because I'm starting as the Italian forces, who I understand mostly from your podcast. They were massively underprepared for the situation they were getting themselves into.
You know
So
what? In terms of technology and in terms of production, yes. But in terms of actual doctrine and what they could have pulled off, they technically did have the tools to win, and they could have decisively defeated the Allies if they had done things right. And they were trained to do it right, but their leadership, I can't even understand this, for no apparent reason, just decided to not go with this special doctrine that they had learned and fumbled the entire thing at the beginning.
I would just add to that, to your point, Craig. They already had practiced in a booklet that
Yeah.
like detailed out a combined arms approach, like what we would see in the Blitzkrieg that the Germans used in the Battle of France. And they had practiced it much more earlier. And the crazy thing is, Marshal Graziani, the initial Italian commander at the start of the campaign, he was the one who was one of the key pioneers of it. But a lot of the Italian command still believed in the World War One era style
Yeah.
of the massed infantry that's going to be the key decisive factor. I
and
mean, don't
that's
get me wrong, infantry is still going to be important to hold, but they're not your punch anymore.
Yeah.
that's
So
sort of
why did
the
they?
go for it. Yeah, speaking over
Oh,
you, go for it.
yeah. I was just wondering if he pioneered that combined arms strategy. Why didn't he use it? Do you know? Was it like from top down sort of Italian command, or yeah, what?
Basically, it came down to a lot. It's a lot of variables, but logistically, his the slowest units he had slowed down all of his forces, and instead of doing what Gaurav was alluding to, a combined arms force thing that he had trained specifically for, and he knew it had worked because they had used it previously in Ethiopia, he massed up all of his men into this like large column, put them on a very vulnerable road to invade the British positions in Egypt, and he basically did it, I guess, for simplicity's sake. I guess he didn't believe in some of his men or something. It's very bizarre that he did what he did because he was the pioneer. He had already seen the benefits of this doctrine, and at the last minute he just caved in and did the conservative thing.
So I guess for you James, avoid that mistake when you're playing as the Axis. Along those lines, is there any big mistakes that the Allies made that you think I should
Oh,
try and avoid doing something
At
relative?
this, are you speaking with regards to the early parts of the campaign, like
Uh,
in June 1940 onwards?
say in
yeah, sort of
general.
at the start, but also in general, if they mess things up later, that'd be good to know as well.
Um, at the start, I wouldn't really say so, since the British Army pretty much was disarmed after Dunkirk and the subsequent evacuations of France. They were focusing heavily on home defense and the Battle of the Atlantic, while they started to rearm themselves. They were buying tons of weapons from America, and the Dominion troops from Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, India were all being shipped primarily to the Middle Eastern theater of operations. But I would say the biggest mistake that the Allies made, which they never really fully rectified, even though there were some key political and military figures identified this, was the anti-tank gun. The reason we know about the famous 88 millimeter anti-tank gun was it could be adapted because it had a very high muzzle velocity, which allowed it to penetrate armor at distances of almost 2,000 meters. And the British anti-tank guns were woefully underpowered in comparison to this, which is why, while and they wrongfully believed that it was the German tanks that were the superior force to theirs, when most of these knockouts were actually happening due to powerful anti-tank weapons. And they had this similar type of anti-tank gun that was guarding Cairo and the Suez Canal, which never really came under and they were disposed as proper AA guns, but the area was never under threat at all. And even I remember one of the ministers of state for the region from the British did suggest that, maybe we could ship at least half of them over to the front lines, but the idea never really went that far.
Well,
I'd
range of 2,000 meters. That's nearly the whole length of the board itself, because it feels like that thing is about 2,000 meters.
I'd say actually from a game perspective, because obviously we have to take this into consideration. It's a board game. I would assume the game is going to start off with the Italian invasion, where the Italians will be on their own. They won't have any German allies. And just like in the real history, the British were on the defensive because honestly, they were being attacked pretty quickly and such. And in our history, the British had done such a good job just in the early raids that they were capable of just launching a counteroffensive and just they desolated the Italians and they ran all the way across the other end of North Africa, pushing them. So I would say to the Allied player, if this is resembling the actual history, don't be afraid to launch a counteroffensive and push.
No, no, I
And
think you should
maybe
be afraid. You should be afraid, Andy. You shouldn't do that. No, that sounds like bad advice. These guys
well,
don't know what they're talking about.
well, you could just Andrew, just remember, since you're playing as the Allies, at this point in time, the British have armored superiority. The
Oh yeah.
Italians just had no answer to the Matilda tanks. They were just pretty much going through as mobile fortresses,
It's like bringing a knife to a gunfight.
Well, my
pretty
answer to
much.
it is going to be to hide your game pieces so you can't find the tanks. How about that? That's
I think that's probably the only way the Italians would have stopped the Matilda tanks.
I don't know why they didn't think about that during the war. They could have just hit them. But, hindsight is 2020. So another thing I wanted to ask, because the game itself, each turn is meant to represent a full week of history. So if you were to convert that into these 111 turns, is there any particular week that you think, if it aligns with history, will be the most exciting to play through?
Personally, it would come down to the battles at El Alamein, which is, kind of the traditional. Those are the battles everyone talks about in North Africa because it was, I think, the real turning point when the Allies finally just stole the initiative completely from Rommel and his logistics collapsed. So, in terms of the board game, because the North African campaign was about 3 years. You're looking at about what 150 weeks or so there. Board game's 111, so it's a little
I
concentrated.
think it would be closer towards maybe I mean, sorry, turn 65, 70 range, I guess.
Yeah,
Probably.
like three-fourths
Yeah.
in. Yeah.
Okay, so that's about 5 years from now. So we just
Yeah.
got to hold out. We've
Uh,
got something to look forward to. That's the
well,
light at the end.
I would just say there are 2 weeks that really stand out, and surprisingly, it's not going to be what Greg said. For me, it's actually the battle before the second battle of El Alamein, the Battle of Alam el Hafa, which was
Okay.
when Montgomery took over. So
True.
in terms of turns, it's I think going to be at least 5 turns before this. But the reason I love this is this was Rommel's last desperate attempt to break through the Allied lines, and probably the only chance he
Yeah.
could have had because in reality, Montgomery was building up a lot of men and materials, and he would get like this huge supply of the 100,000-ton convoy, which is around 300 Sherman tanks to reinforce his army. And this
Definitely.
was also the first battle where from a historical perspective, I love is Montgomery and Harold Alexander took over and they completely restored the morale of the Eighth Army, which was pretty much on the brink of collapse. They were led so badly for the better part of the year. So they not many of the soldiers, like from colonel and below, they just did not have any faith in their higher ups. So
I,
this, from a historical perspective, I really admire that.
you know what I just realized, Gaurav?
Yeah.
I was looking at some of the aspects of this board game, and the choice to raid Malta is there. So in theory,
Oh,
the Italians
yes.
could just invade Malta at the beginning of the game, and that changes everything.
All
Well,
right,
actually, the
James, one suggestion. Uh, don't do the Mussolini and hold off the invasion of Malta till the Germans arrive,
well,
Yeah.
there's
because
actually a
that
rule in there. You can raid Malta, in the sense of you can sort of bomb Malta, but there are rules in there to say that you can't actually invade
Oh no,
because it
damn.
it, it states that it
wow,
would be too significant if you were able to actually invade
Yeah.
Malta, that it would throw the game completely
it's
out of whack. So yeah, they seem to have accounted for that. So the excitement you had, they saw this in 1979 when they made the game, and they said no, that's
It's
gonna
like that
it's gonna ruin the game.
that tingle of alternate history in me was just like, oh, just take out Malta, it's all done.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of well, there's a lot of sort of really specific details that I think are partially there to make it historically accurate, and partially there because the game designers were, I think, cruel more than anything else. They had a real twisted imagination. Part of it is you actually get a piece to signify Rommel. So I will have a little Rommel piece, and he's sort of like Roadrunner from the cartoons because he can move around the desert so easily, and every time he gets into a conflict, he's got more maneuverability than any other piece to just sort of get out of there. Um, and
it kind
another,
of helped that Neil Ritchie was the Allied commander as well.
well, another individual who's a named piece in the game is, I can't remember, the Star of Africa. He was the pilot.
Marseille.
Yes.
Joachim
Yeah.
Marseille.
Nice.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
get him as a pilot, and we were reading up on some of the rules the other day for the air combat in the game, and we got into a rabbit hole looking into this guy's past. This guy is crazy. His
Yeah.
history is bizarre. 22 years old, and what a life he lived.
Oh yeah.
He
It's
We read
it's
about him.
crazy. I mean,
You played ragtime tunes on the piano in front of Adolf Hitler. Like, how you must have to be a brilliant pilot to get away with doing that unpunished. That's
uh,
bizarre.
I would just want to add one thing. A lot of these Wehrmacht, Luftwaffe, or Kriegsmariners, soldiers and officers who won these various, not only just the Iron Cross, but the Iron Cross with their swords, oak leaves, right? Which is just like, going up in the hierarchy of the military medals. A lot of them did not like the Nazi high command. They like openly despised them. Marseille was one guy. And I just had one thing about Marseille. Only 7 of his 158 aircrafts that he downed were fighters over the English Channel. Rest were all in North Africa.
Yeah, so he most of what he pulled off was actually in North Africa then. A lot of it was, yeah. Well,
Oh,
I'm gonna have to try and replicate
he,
that.
Yeah.
I'll just say, like, Marseille, he did not really shine because when you were in the strict hierarchy of the Luftwaffe, like when he was stationed in the squadrons in northern France, he would come back completely drunk with a couple of French girls with him to the base and just did not give a damn about the orders. He would fly off on his own in combat and not stick to formation. And a lot of the Luftwaffe commanders could not get through. It's when he moves to Africa, he gets that commander that's able to understand him. And he realizes, well, as long as he does the job up in the air, I don't care what he does on the ground.
Hang on a minute, I've just
And
realized that this is just the plot of Top Gun.
Axis Top Gun, yeah.
That's what the movie was based on. It's this guy. That's
Yeah.
yeah, he sounds like a real character. I'm gonna have to get into character. Maybe not, in the sense of supporting a Nazi regime.
maybe
but maybe with just
he
the.
did not. Well, if anything, he did not support the Nazi regime. So
Oh, in that case,
you're
I
good
can
on that.
definitely,
That's
I
fair.
can definitely take on
Yeah.
that role. Then that's fine. I'm a big supporter of not supporting the Nazis. So yeah, that's handy. There's another rule which I'm not sure if you've come across this. If you've done any sort of research on the game, looked into it at all, one of the things you've probably come across is the pasta rule. So the Italian forces in the game, this is bizarre. So every unit needs water and fuel, ammunition, all that sort of stuff. But the Italian forces in particular actually use more water than any other unit in the game or any other faction
Yeah, I know
because
why.
they need to eat pasta.
The canned spaghetti. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if they don't use this pasta point, if they aren't able to eat pasta because they don't have enough water, their morale and cohesion levels drop so significantly that they're non-functional. So we wanted to check: is there any
Yeah.
historical accuracy in that? Are there any accounts of Italian forces becoming completely inconsolable because of a lack of pasta?
I would say lack of, in a way, yes, just because robbers did not like them, and most of the supplies aren't going to come to them; they're going to the Africa court on priority. So I
mean-
think from that aspect, there's definitely that.
You have to imagine it's actually it comes from the British perspective because when they started overrunning the Italians early on in the campaigns, they came across their rations, which are canned spaghetti and such, and it seemed very odd to them that this was something their military would actually plan to use in war. It was pretty comical because again, yeah, it did use water too, so it was stupid, especially in the desert.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I'd want some creature comforts out in the desert. I think, yeah, tinned spaghetti. Yeah, it's
Probably
better
the best
than
you would get considering the situation.
Yeah,
That's
it
it,
kind of
yeah.
beats corned beef. The corned beef can's probably pretty rough, I'd say.
But the thing is, in the
Well,
desert, you
I would
never
just-
actually you never actually get hungry in the desert because of all of these sandwiches there.
Oh my God.
Well,
That-
as long as you don't send Anakin Skywalker there, I think we're good.
Of course,
yeah.
it gets everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's irritating. It's rough, and that is a good way to describe this game. It's going to be rough and irritating.
I love
and-
the fact that the guys who made this game put that in. That is troll peak performance there.
Well,
Oh yeah.
there's
They
a
also
lot
at
of that.
multiple point in the rules say like sorry to like you as you're reading it, or like why are you still doing this? It's like-
I just really wonder, are these the same guys that also probably, directed the Monty Python movies?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is that vibe. I think it is that sort of 70s cynicism really baked
Yeah.
into the game, and it really shows through the rules. There was another rule that we came across the other day, and I guess, yeah, there's a bit of curiosity on my part here because it mentions camels, and the way it mentions them is a bit weird, because it says when it comes to transport for planes, you can't transport live camels, but you can transport dead camels. Now, I'm not sure what utility a dead camel has in the context of this board
Food,
game. Is there any?
food.
It
No,
was,
no,
yeah,
food.
food maybe. I mean, it can't be fuel, can't be
Even
ammunition. So
even this one stumps me, I guess, because they were eating camels. I mean, this is a bizarre
Uh,
one.
it
Hey,
just
come
seems
on,
like such
Craig.
a.
We've seen cannibalism in our other podcasts, like when we
Yeah,
discussed New Guinea. So
I mean, even Guadalcanal, freaking
yeah.
yeah, the last after Kawaguchi, yeah, there is a lot of cannibalism in the Pacific. But I mean, you do eat camel meat, and Chinese fondue and stuff. So I guess they must have had some kind of instance where a lot of camels are being butchered or something. I don't know.
I don't know. Is it for like the Australian divisions of the Allied forces? Since at least I know some delicacies in Australia today do use camel meat. Just wondering.
Oh, yeah, it's true. They have an issue in Australia with camels, don't they? They brought them over and it caused like this whole thing where there's too many of them.
That's a very unique
Oh,
problem
so
to
they
have.
they have just have I heard of is there like a Great Camel War now? Just asking.
Oh, the Emu
The
War.
emu war.
Oh yes.
No, just the next one, right? Version
Oh
two.
yeah.
But by the way, this is totally sidetracking, but I tried to con the owners of Kings and Generals YouTube channel to let me write a whole script for the Emu War for April Fools, and they wouldn't go for it. I said I would do a very serious episode and make the narrator like treat it very seriously.
I would
They
have
didn't go
watched
for
that.
it.
I would have
I think
loved
that would
that.
be
Yeah.
I would
great.
have loved that.
Yeah.
Well, the game has a breakdown of pretty much every single unit that was there. There's even stats and rules for units that never actually showed up for
Oh,
the campaign. They weren't there in theater,
Oh,
but they were either sort of scheduled to be there and didn't end up there for a bunch of reasons. So it's very in
okay.
depth. Are there any particular battalions or units that we should keep an eye out on? Sort of, is there anyone I should be worried about that Andy's going to throw my way with him being the allied player?
Oh yeah, there's a big moment for the Allies when I can't remember when this occurred, but when they had overrun the Italians, they pushed them all the way back. Churchill relinquished, he took a few divisions away to go over to Greece because the Italians had made the amazing decision to invade Greece also, and that didn't go well for them. Gaurav, do you remember
not to
what divisions that
mention,
was?
I'll just say one thing. Not to mention, the Italians kept an armored division of over
Yeah,
200 Cappuccino machines in the mountains.
yeah.
In the
And
mountain.
Yeah, so the Italians were invading from, Albania through the Epirus Mountains into Greece. Yep, tanks in the mountains. That's all I need to say.
yeah, I don't know if that
One,
plays into this game at all, the blunder in Greece, because
one moment, I'm just trying to remember those divisions because I think this was at the first time at the start of the war when,
when they brought in the Australian divisions to replace them,
dude, yeah, one sec.
because
Just
it
give
was
me
it was an
a.
enormous blunder. Because the Greek campaign was going to be a failure because Hitler would get involved. So if those divisions had just remained in Africa, they probably would have pushed the Axis even further back. Maybe even started invading Tunisia and stuff. Would have
Uh,
changed.
I, I don't remember the unit because I do know that at the start of Operation Compass, when the British launched their counterattack, O'Connor pretty much had the 7th Armored Division, the famous Desert Rats, which is kind of like, the most heroed British unit of this army, and the 6th Australian Division and the 4th Indian Infantry Division. So initially it was the Indian Division that was fighting, then the Green Australian troops took over, and then they became veterans by the end of the campaign.
Yeah.
Well,
But
speaking of
yeah,
the
I think the
desert
biggest
rats,
problem.
I do actually have a book on the desert rats that I've been reading in preparation to thwart
Yes.
Andy to make sure that they don't live up to their historical significance. I'm going to rewrite history and yeah, I'm going to tarnish that.
Well,
Make sure that you can't get me with them.
I'm gonna say one of the best allied units that were there was probably the Long Range Desert Group.
Yeah.
Not
Definitely.
because they were like, the SAS equivalent. They would be going behind enemy lines, but not by aircraft. no
Through the desert.
parachutes, through the desert in small motor convoys, and they were causing havoc to the Axis machinery. I think in one raid, at the cost of one guy being injured, they pretty much wiped out an Italian airbase with almost 40 aircraft destroyed.
And the
Wow.
Allies almost had a monopoly on raiding because they had amphibious assaults upon, some of the ports. They had, of course, the long-range desert force going through the desert and such. Whereas the Axis, I mean, during offensives, of course, they took key areas and there was raiding, but they weren't as ambitious, I found, with their like a long-term raid like that.
Is that because they didn't have the troops or equipment for it, or was that a sort of command decision?
I
Well,
think they rather wanted to concentrate their forces in an overwhelming manner to support their main thrust.
yeah,
So Rommel's, while he would have to split his forces, right? Since he had the standard tactic of a diversion and a hook around swing and outflank the enemy. So at both
Right.
points, you do need at least a sizable amount of firepower for their respective objectives.
also an issue
Right.
of fuel. You have to use fuel for the
Yeah.
motorized vehicles. But I mean, what else would you do with those cappuccino machines? I mean, that's what I would have used them for. They're basically just armored cars at this point, whatever the Italians were throwing
Yeah,
them.
we, we even though they're officially classified as tanks, yeah, we just call them armored cars just by their effectiveness.
When you really
Not to
look into
mention,
it, it's hilarious. Like the problems with the Italian tanks are comical.
it's it's kind of crazy, right? They like almost every other tank in the theater could have a 360 degree rotating turret, and the most powerful Italian tanks at the time had very limited mobility. So if you want to shoot, you have to move the entire vehicle.
Yeah, you had to literally point your tank at the enemy.
Yeah, when I listened to your episode of, I think it was the first or second episode of your podcast series about the campaign, I remember hearing that part. This was after we decided I was going to be the Axis forces, and I was just devastated that the tank's so bad. It reminded me of Michael Keaton's Batman, where he couldn't move his
Yeah.
neck, so he had to
Yeah.
rotate his whole body in order to look round. That's how I'm
Oh yeah.
envisioning these tanks.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna
But
yeah.
Pretty
you are going to
much.
get
It's
Panzers later. You will
That's
yeah.
have
true.
the best like the Tiger 4. You will have at the end of the game, I guess, the arguably best tank, but you'll have few of them, I would imagine.
Yeah,
Well,
because
you definitely get the best anti-tank gun,
Oh yeah, of
the
course.
88 millimeter flak.
Yeah.
Like, considering what was used historically, the Allies have nothing to
It,
compare.
you
undisputed
hear that,
weapon
Andy?
during
Nothing.
World War
You've
II.
got nothing.
No, but he does have a big advantage over you.
He has the 2 pounders.
He has the
Uh,
numbers also,
Yeah.
and servicing.
okay,
I just
okay.
gotta ask this: is there any info with regards to like servicing or recoverability with terms of your armored assets?
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
There's
there's
pretty
rules for
extensive rules.
recovering aircraft and vehicles. So, if your vehicles run out of fuel, you can go and get them and also recover downed aircraft as well. So,
Oh,
and then
Really
refit
great.
them. So there's that whole thing of, keeping
across
everything
the
in working
board.
order.
Yeah. Across the board, the Allies are going to have better repair for tanks, for trucks, for aircraft. You're going to have standardized parts. I don't know how the game will break it down, but for the Germans and Italians, it was a terrible situation. They weren't using the same parts, let alone even like the Panzers. I mean, parts for one Panzer to another were different also. They're, the crews for just repairing vehicles were not, it was like a whole other league when it came to the Allies, and the Americans and the British were working together. Either side could repair the other side's vehicles because it was all standardized. So for the Allies in this board game, it would seem that you're gonna have you're gonna be able to have your cake and eat it too, compared to the Axis who are gonna suffer from everything else.
Yeah, just adding to this point of the Germans, because right now they over-engineered everything.
Yeah.
I think the great example was the difference between the MG34 machine gun and the MG42. The MG34, because all its elaborate looks, would take about 110 man hours of engineering to just prepare one.
Oh my God.
And that's because they have to make it look grand and
Yeah.
extravagant. When they finally decided to cut it down, I think the MG42 could take about 50 hours of engineering and work to make, which is a significant reduction. But yeah, the Allies also have the advantage. Like, this was the historical thing, which I never really learned about till fairly recently was the country's inert motorization.
Mm.
While Nazi propaganda no doubt created that image of like, the technologically armor heavy Wehrmacht and every Luftwaffe, they were just the absolute minority of the army.
Yeah.
The Germans were still so heavily reliant on horses and
Oh
foot
yeah.
transportation, and the Italians were even worse. And this is due to the fact that before war broke out, France and Britain and the United States had exponentially more cars in their country than Germany or Italy. So the pool of men who understand mechanical work, who know to drive and operate these vehicles and machines, it's far larger, which is why they were able to create like these support groups, which we mentioned on our podcast, that could just come up into the field and within a few hours, any knockdown British tank or American tank for that matter could be up and running.
Do you want to swap teams, Andy?
Germans,
I feel like I've got the bad team. I feel
No,
like
this is making me more excited to play.
yeah, I can see how giddy you are. I'm not happy about this, not at all.
But since it is a board game, all of this, it all comes down to logistics when it came to this campaign. But this is a board game, and yes, it's representative of the real history. But I imagine since you have the ability to raid each other's convoys and such, if the Axis early on establishes more of a dominance in the Mediterranean Sea, and you neutralize, let's say, Malta, then it should be you who is on the receiving end of logistical supply lines. So, in theory, you should potentially just walk over the Allies.
So
I would
push
actually
hard,
even
push
go as
fast.
far as to say
Yeah.
when James, when you get the German units coming in 1941,
Hmm.
you could actually consider like taking some parts of your panzer units to actually form this striking force.
Yeah.
While it might be initially fuel expensive for you, at that time, around the time when the Rommel arrived, the Allies have absolutely no answer even to the Panzer IIs. And most German tanks, until like the Sherman tanks started to arrive in 1942, were pretty much faster, better armored, and better gunned than anything the Allies had. I mean, sure, the British Matilda was the only tank that had a good amount of armor in comparison, but that was slow as hell. I think off country it could just go at 6 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Well,
Brisk walk.
yeah. This, yeah. The more I hear, the more worried I am that I'm in a lot of trouble. But
Well, it's as Craig said, your greatest advantage is at the start of the campaigns and all. Like, if we were to divide the entire North African campaign into various phases, I would say you have the striking power at the start,
Yeah.
and you got to utilize that. Andy, as like typical to the allies, I'm pretty sure he can build up his forces far better.
Yeah.
Because if the board game is trying to keep to that accuracy,
You know,
so
rule
he's
rule
quite
of thumb.
vulnerable at the start.
Rule of thumb, and this goes for any World War II board game, especially with Axis and allies. If you're the Axis, your only strategy is to be aggressive from the beginning because the longer the game takes, whoever the ally is going to receive more and more help and more production because, yeah, like in this case, it's the British and the Commonwealth. So they're going to be receiving more units from Australia, New Zealand, India, and such. You've got the Free French forces all at the end. And the Americans, I guess, will come in at the end phase of this game. So for the Axis, it's kind of a no-brainer. You just have to be quick and decisive early on. Don't wait.
well, you hear that, Andy?
And
I'm gonna push
Andy,
hard. I'm gonna push fast. I'm gonna be aggressive. I've also just
I
realised
got a question, James.
sorry that I've just realised. Sorry, Gaurav, the meeting we've
Yeah.
got just over a minute left because
Oh,
I'm a
all right.
cheapskate and didn't realise that Zoom is limited to time.
Fair
Um,
enough.
but it's been great having you guys on. Craig, Gaurav, you've been fantastic. And anyone
Yeah,
who
thank you very
happens to
much.
listen to this, check out the what will be at that point, I would imagine, the Echoes of War channel. It's much more informative than anything we'll ever do, and it's really well delivered, fascinating stuff. But yeah, thank you very much. You've given me a lot to worry about. I'm going to have some sleepless nights knowing that I'm underprepared, but at least I get to be aggressive towards Andy,
Yeah.
and it's justified.
Yep.
Defensive war at the start for me. Good to know what I'm going into. So thank you for that.
It was a ton of fun. Thank you for inviting us onto this. And don't worry, as being the
I'm
Axis
really
player, trust
looking
in the
forward to
spaghetti.
seeing how your game progresses. I'm really intrigued for this now.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Maybe
we'll
check
keep
back
you up to
in.
date.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll let you know how it goes, how alternate history turns out. But yeah, thanks, guys. Speak soon.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, there we go. That was the interview. Like I say, hasty getaway at the end there. We did not realize that we're going to be limited on time with that call. So when it flashed up at the top that I had 2 minutes remaining, did not know what to say.
You panicked.
Yeah, panic is definitely what happened. It didn't-
Maybe future interviews will, two things to take away. Buy the full Zoom thing if we're doing it on Zoom, and don't panic. But yeah, those guys were great. Massive thanks to them for coming on.
Yeah, they did great. We did very mediocre, I think. In term, you know what? No, it was our first rodeo. That's not.
And as a
undersell
result,
ourselves.
it wasn't great.
Well, the thing is, I had my work Christmas party the day before we recorded that. I was incredibly hungover during that entire interview.
Because we're nothing if not professional.
I'm not. It was Christmas. It was Christmas, Andrew.
Okay,
Relax a little bit.
you've burned that excuse, and it's once a year.
Yeah. Well, Christmas comes around later on this year, so we're on the 13th of January right now.
Hurtling through the new year.
Oh, we haven't done this in 2 weeks.
Yeah. We should also stop time dating these because they're being released wildly out of order.
Not out of order.
No,
It's
not
just
out of
that.
order, just out of time.
Well, thanks again to Craig and Gaurav, who were a fantastic pair of fellows to have on, giving
Yeah,
us
the
some
good part of that.
some much needed info.
Yeah.
They're still kicking. They're doing some great stuff, and they have a YouTube channel, which is the Pacific War channel, and they cover loads of stuff. They've got a podcast which is Echoes of War. They've rebranded because they do a lot of broad stuff.
Yeah, they're getting all war, I guess, rather than just the Pacific. So looking forward to that from them.
Yeah. Not much of it will be relevant to what we're doing because we've decided to really bottleneck ourselves in what we're covering. So I suppose it's not super relevant to us. But if you've stumbled across what we're doing because you're interested in history, now's your chance to leave
And go listen to a better podcast
about history.
about history.
Yeah, go off and listen to these guys.
It's
They know what
actually
they're doing.
about history.
They've got great stuff. They've got a YouTube membership and a Patreon at the Pacific War channel. And you can even vote for what they cover. So don't get stuck and bogged down with us. We're not covering history. We're trying to cover a board game.
We're making it.
We're doing a poor job of it, but we're doing it.
Yeah.
And they were a grand have, and thanks for being on. And we're gonna keep on plugging away at this board game.
Yep.
We're gonna pretend that we're into history. We're gonna pretend that we know what we're talking about. And to be fair, we've not even done that. We've not even pretended. We're pretty candid that we don't know what's going on.
We want to learn.
We want to learn. We want to know what's happening. We want to know what we're doing.
Like everything, it'll be slowly and badly executed, but we are learning.
We're just two subtle and humble boys. That's all we are.
I'm brave.
And brave. Well, we'll end that there. And
Yeah, please check out Echoes of War.
They're
They
good
were
guys.
Incredibly generous.
better
to
guys than us.
Jump on
what
a
they're
call
doing.
with us. So, I mean, anyone listening to this who isn't listening to theirs, correct that.
Well, we'll catch you next time. Back to the usual scheduled program of us trying to put together how we're going to tackle this game. And we'll talk to you then.
Goodbye.